Hi, I'm Daniel Butler. Welcome to another edition of America's Dumbest Criminals.
On this episode of America's Dumbest Criminals.
A careless criminal stuffs the wrong crustacean down his pants. A parachuter runs into a little technical difficulty. A confused crook runs right into the arms of the law.
He's gonna come get in with you, Chuck. Look at that idiot.
An escaped con forgets his glasses.
All this and more on this week's episode of America's Dumbest Criminals. Here's your host, Daniel Butler.
A guy decided to parachute from a radio tower one afternoon and didn't quite plan on, well... Sometimes a picture just says it all, doesn't it? A convict at Jerome County Jail managed to slip under the exercise yard fence and escape. The quick wit immediately disposed of his signature round glasses, assuming that he wouldn't be recognized. But we all know what happens when you assume. See Dick run. Run, Dick, run. See Dick flag down a car. Flag, Dick, flag. See Dick squint. Squint, Dick, squint. See officer arrest Dick. Duh, Dick, duh. Without his glasses, Dick didn't realize that it was a cop car that he had flagged down. See Dick go back to jail. Stay, Dick, stay. For every dumb crime, there is a dumb getaway. But when it comes to picking a hiding place, it gets a little trickier, as this investigator from Richardson, Texas points out.
We were driving down a 6-lane divided roadway there, and all of a sudden, from the parking lot of a little shopping center there adjacent to this roadway, a guy bolts out in front of us. And he's got something stuffed up under his coat. So I looked over at my partner and said, I don't know what he stole, but he just stole something. So we looked over in the shopping center parking lot, and here's an elderly lady coming across the parking lot, and she's waving her hands in the air and just having a real fit. This guy just stole her purse. And so the guy ran up an alley. Well, by the time I got out of the car, and managed to get in foot chase with him there. He had already cut through the fences, and so I was only a short distance behind, but I exited the fenced area where he had ran and into a large open parking lot. And there was really no place for him to go, but there were some trash dumpsters. So I thought, well, a guy had to be in the trash dumpster. And so I started flipping open the trash dumpsters, and got to about the second trash dumpster and flipped this thing open, and there he is laid in the trash dumpster, just laid back in there, still clutching the purse. And bad thing about it was this guy had chosen his trash dumpster where a little adjacent pet shop had just cleaned out all the cages. I mean, he smelled terrible. So brought him out at gunpoint, laid him on the concrete there. And, you know, it was one of those situations where you really didn't want to put your handcuffs on this guy because he smelled terrible.
This dummy chose a dumpster full of kitty litter and parrot poop for his hideout. But hey, the cops smelled a rat and a ferret and a dachshund. Every once in a while, a dumb criminal turns his act around, just in the nick of time. A Los Angeles health officer was staking out a roadside area that was constantly being used as a dump. Soon, a rubbish rebel arrived and promptly began unloading his treasure.
5L6, I'm code 6 in the area of Fern and Arrow Highway on a possible illegal dumping. Unbelievable.
But before he finished, he noticed the officer out of the corner of his eye. Without missing a beat, he quickly stacked his waste back in the truck, as well as cleaning up the surrounding grounds. Giving credit where credit was due, the officer followed the reformed litterer to his next destination, a city dump, but did not give the man a ticket. Happy, we guessed, that he had already cleaned up his act and the roadside area.
Go back to the couch and assume the position.
I'm Daniel Butler, and this is my coquettish co-host, Beaumont Bacon.
Hello, Daniel.
Hiya.
Hiya.
Officers arrived at a residence to pick up a guy named Jack with a felony warrant on his record. When they got to the door, a drunken man in a tank top answered. When they asked him if he was Jack, the guy said, "No, I'm his brother Joe." He said that Jack was over at their mother's house doing laundry and wouldn't be back for a couple of hours.
Those fine washables, those darn fine washables.
Yeah, woolite.
Woolite.
The officer knew that something was up and asked the guy for his ID, which he didn't have. Then they asked him for his social security number, which he rattled off, but was about 3 numbers short. That's when they started laughing.
What happened?
Well, they told the guy that next time he decides to lie about his name, he might want to wear a long sleeve shirt to cover that tattoo of his name, Jack, that was probably etched on his arm.
Could have been a boyfriend.
No.
No,
Dude.
not in this case.
Not this guy.
Drunk skunks seem to think alike. An officer in Anderson, Indiana was blocking traffic for an accident with his lights flashing when a car came from the other direction, passed him, and then slammed on his brakes and pulled over. The drunk driver got out of his car and staggered over to the officer and said, "Okay, you got me. I'm sorry, officer. I'm really drunk."
Really?
Yep. It turns out that the pickled perp only saw the officer's flashing lights in his rearview mirror as he passed the accident and assumed that the officer was actually driving behind him and attempting to pull him over for drunk driving.
Which brings us to the Vidiot of the Week.
Of all the stories we received this week, this is our absolute favorite.
An officer in Lillian, Oklahoma had cornered 2 suspects behind a local bar. As he approached, one of the suspects quickly dropped a bag.
Who dropped it?
It's not mine, sir. I've never seen it in my life.
What do you have to say?
I don't know. It's not mine.
Unable to prove ownership, the officer had no choice but to let the guys go and confiscate the bag of drugs. The losers went to another bar and told the bartender about how a cop had just taken their drugs. Well, the barkeep informed them that the officer lived just a couple of blocks away and joked that they should just go to his house and ask for their drugs back, which they did. The officer's wife called her husband, who came home and promptly moved the dopey dopers from his front porch into the back of his cruiser.
Well, good for him.
Well,
Another case closed.
Yeah, buddy. We all get by with a little help from our friends. But this convict's friend got a little more than he bargained for when he stopped by for a little visit. An officer assigned to front desk duty was busy doing paperwork when a man approached and asked if he could post bail for a friend that he called Pookie. The officer told him that people were booked under their real name. The man seemed a little perplexed and started digging things out of his pocket, claiming that he had his friend's name somewhere. The bumbling bird didn't seem to realize that he had dropped a couple of bags of cocaine on top of his belongings. The officer arrested the guy and put him in the same cell as Pookie, so he could explain to his friend the reason that he couldn't post his bail. Pookie sure knew how to pick his friends, didn't he? We all know how difficult it can be to find a job these days. But this little lady was sure that she was perfect for this particular position. She thought it would be nice to work in the little town of Rock Hill, South Carolina, and decided to fill out an application down at the local police department. She was confident that they would want her. She had all the qualifications, her resume, the completed application, and a warrant out for her arrest in New Jersey. Well, she was right. They certainly did want her. That should make her feel a little better. Sometimes it's the little things in life that make a big difference. Thankfully, this dumb criminal didn't take the time to consider some of them when he attempted to rob this gas station in Bensenville, Illinois. The buffoon entered the gas station's convenience store wearing your standard issue ski mask and demanded all the money. He didn't plan on the woman behind the counter telling them that if he didn't have a gun, he should leave. Believe it or not, he did just that and said that he'd be back. The clerk called the police and filed a report. She gave a good description of his car, but was unable to identify him because of the mask. They said to call if she heard from him again, which she did about 20 minutes later. She saw his car pull up, and she immediately called the police, who instructed her to lock the door. She did, and hid under the counter. The masked marvel tried the door. He didn't appear to understand why it wouldn't open. So what does he do? He pulls off his mask and presses his face to see where the clerk went. Smile, you're on bandit camera.
Still to come on America's Dumbest Criminals.
A careless criminal stuffs the wrong crustacean down his pants. A confused crook runs right into the arms of the law.
Hey, he's gonna come get in with you, Chuck. Look at that idiot.
A labeled loser robs a store. A video vandal gets ready for his close-up.
All this and more when we come back.
You have the right to remain seated.
Well, this next surveillance tape shows a man who was collecting permanent lifetime disability insurance for a back injury he claimed would cripple him for the rest of his life. Well, it obviously did affect him. He spent some time with his family, took a light trip, but he finally flipped out. However, the insurance company had supplied him with a nice ergomatic mattress for the bunk in his jail cell. While sitting in a parking lot one night, a Florida police officer noticed a rental truck coming up behind him with its headlights off.
As the officer approached the vehicle, he noticed a distinct smell of alcohol.
You driving with no lights on. How much you had to drink tonight?
Got this.
Why don't you step out?
How much have I had to drink?
After questioning the two men, the officer's partner opened the back of the truck and found a variety of boxes filled with marijuana.
Got some dope back here, partner. Looks like we hit the mother load.
Gee, there was only a refrigerator dolly in the back of my last moving truck. A hat says a lot about the person wearing it. It gives a sense of style, fashion, and personal flair. This dumb criminal chose a hat that said a little more about himself than he'd planned. Our fashion fop decided to don something a little more different than the old ski mask trend that so many of the crooks before him had worn. He opted for the rebel without a clue look and used his motorcycle helmet, as you can see. However, he forgot to check himself out in the rearview mirror before he left, and we all know how that usually leads to disaster. He had forgotten that his full name was printed plainly across the front of his helmet for all to see. Dummy. Which they did. And after a quick call to the fashion police, the dapper dad was easily picked up and taken to a place where the only thing over his head will be a bunk holding his cellmate, Skeeter. This dumb criminal should have put on his thinking cap before he attempted to rob this convenience store in Claremont, Florida. He probably just forgot it, along with a few other things, as you'll see. You can see the guy walk into the store and go directly up to the counter, holding his mask in his hand. The clerk acknowledges him and goes about his business. That's when the goon realizes that he forgot his mask and quickly steps behind a nearby display, puts it on, then comes back to the clerk and asks for the money. That's when the goof notices the camera and tells the clerk to give him the tape, which he does. Then the guy just ran out of the store. He forgot about the robbery altogether and left with only a copy of his screen test to show for his efforts. Want to see my demo reel?
You have the right to remain seated.
Now we'd like to report about a new device that's on the cutting edge of technology, the metal detector.
Seems that this bozo was having a bit of trouble with the metal detector at a security checkpoint. First, it was his pager, then his belt, then his keys. Finally, cracking under the pressure, the cowboy threw up his hands and said, okay, you've got me. I've got a bag of dope in my boot.
Come on, sir.
The drugs were confiscated, and the doper was quickly arrested and booted into the slammer. An officer with the Riverton, Wyoming Police Department was having a nice, quiet afternoon when a motorcycle with 2 riders rolled through a stop sign. He pulled them over and noticed that the passenger was obviously drunk and not over 21. The subject obligingly came up with a license that did not resemble him in the slightest. His explanation was that he had had a bad day when the picture was taken. However, a check of the license revealed that the owner was wanted for armed robbery in Las Vegas and considered dangerous. Sensing something was not right, the boy started to flee, but was quickly stopped.
Help! Freeze! Freeze! Don't shoot him, Put your hands behind your head. Step back here. Put your hands behind your head. Step back off that tire.
A search revealed a large knife in his pocket and a confession that the license was not his. Back at the station, he admitted that the license had been given to him by a friend after it had expired so he could get a drink with no hassle. It didn't quite work out that way now, did it? You ever feel guilty about picking a live lobster out of the tank at a restaurant? Don't. Here's the story of a steamer that got revenge for the whole lot of them by making a human shoplifter his own personal catch of the day. Wanting to celebrate his girlfriend's birthday, this Boston man decided to steal her something nice, a 4-pound lobster. A very unshellfish act, it's true, but chances were good the security guard on duty would not agree. Acting quickly, the thief stuffed the lobster down his pants and hightailed it for safer turf. Thinking he was safe, the crook was unprepared for the Houdini act that the lobster was about to pull in his pants. With his claws liberated, the crafty crustacean took a bite out of time. At least he clamped down hard on the man's, well, you know. The instant vasectomy required 19 stitches. The guard took him to a hospital where the man was finally released, although his plans for having children have been put on hold, so to speak. And the lobster is requesting drawn butter. Officers in Tulsa, Oklahoma were on the hunt for a second person who had fled on foot after stealing a car. With infrared cameras, the air unit was able to locate the suspect hiding in the woods. They directed the undercover officer on the ground to the suspect's location and watched the stupidity go on from there.
Okay, he's up and moving towards you now. He's moving towards the road. I don't know what his problem is.
I think he thinks he's going to get a ride from one of his buddies.
Yeah, he's cautiously headed your direction. This guy's pretty stupid.
He is, isn't he? Yeah, he probably thinks it's one of his buddy's cars. Get me out of here.
Hey, he's gonna come get in with you, Chuck. Look at that idiot. I've never seen anything like that.
Looked like he was fixing to get in there until he
was.
Foley.
He was. He thought it was one of his homies.
Robert 5, it'll be on OHP.
That takes cake, doesn't it?
I've never seen him.
That's funny.
They really thought he was going to get a ride. He fell for it. He's in custody.
This guy's pretty stupid.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, dumb criminals weren't born this way. They've had to work years to lose enough brain cells to fully qualify as one of America's dumbest criminals. We'll see you next week.
This must have been probably 3 a.m. in the morning. So I saw this guy walking up the street with a huge duffel bag on his shoulder. And I pulled around behind this guy and got out to check, see what he was doing out this time of night. And it was in an industrial section where there just isn't any traffic at that time, especially foot traffic. And he related his story that he had just been over some people who had picked him up and he was trying to find the freeway. This was nowhere near the freeway. He was lost. Finally, at some point, I asked him what he had in his bag. He said, "Oh, I've just got some clothes and things." So I said, "Would it be all right if I looked in there?" And he said, "Oh, sure." And so as soon as I opened the bag up, here's a silver service set. As soon as I found this and started setting it out on the ground, he says, his first statement was, "If I take it back, are you going to put me in jail?"
Dum 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 dum.